The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. Book 4, Taran Wanderer. Chapter 17, The Weir.
While Gurgi lingered in the cottage, Taran followed Linneo to the riverbank. On the way, whistling merrily through his teeth, Linneo stopped to peer into the baskets, and Taran noticed one of them held a large beehive, undoubtedly the source of the honey which had sweetened Gawain's cake. The rest, however, stood empty. Linneo merely shrugged his shoulders.
"Well, no matter," he said. "Something will surely fill them later. Last time a flock of wild geese flew down to rest. You should have seen the feathers left after they'd gone. Enough to stuff cushions for every one of us."
By now they reached the river, which Linneo named as Small Arvon, since farther south it flowed into Great Arvon itself.
"Small it is," he said, "but sooner or later, whatever you might wish comes floating along."
As if to prove his words, he began hauling vigorously at the net staked along the bank. It came up empty, as did the fishing lines. Undismayed, Linneo shrugged again.
"Well, tomorrow, very likely."
"How then?" Taran exclaimed, feeling perplexed as he had never been. "Do you count on baskets and nets to bring you what you need?" He looked at the man in astonishment.
"That I do," replied
Linneo, laughing good-naturedly.
"My holding is small. I work it as best I can. For the rest, why, look you, if I know one thing, it's this. Life's a matter of luck. Trust it, and a man's bound to find what he seeks one day or the next."
Perhaps so," Taran admitted. "But what if it takes longer than that, or never comes at all?"
"Be that as it may," answered Linneo, grinning. "If I fret over tomorrow, I'll have little joy today."
So saying, he clambered nimbly onto the weir, which Taran now saw was made not to bar the flow of water, but to strain and sift the current. Balancing atop this odd construction, seeming more crane-like than ever as he bobbed up and down, bending to poke and pry among the osiers, Linneo soon gave a glad cry and waved excitedly. Taran hurriedly picked his way across the dam to join him. His face fell, however, when he reached Linneo's side. What had caused the man's joyful shout was no more than a discarded horse bridle. "Alas," said Taran, disappointed. "There's little use in that. The bit's missing, and the rein's worn through."
So be it," replied Linneo. "That's what Small Arvon's brought us today, and it will serve one way or another."
He slung the dripping bridle over his shoulder, scrambled from the dam, and with Taran following him, set off with long strides through the grove of trees fringing the river. In a while, Linneo, whose sharp eyes darted everywhere at once, cried out again and stooped at the bottom of a gnarled elm. Amid the roots and for some distance around, mushrooms sprouted abundantly.
"Pluck them up, wanderer," Linneo exclaimed. "There's our supper for tonight. The finest mushrooms I've seen, tender and tasty. We're in luck today."
Quickly gathering his finds, Linneo popped them into a sack dangling from his belt and set off again. Following Linneo's rambling, halting now and then to cull certain herbs or roots, the day sped so swiftly it was nearly over before Taran realized it had begun. Linneo's sack being full, the two returned their steps back to the cottage, taking a path different from the way they had come. As they ambled along, Taran caught his foot on a jutting edge of stone, and he tumbled head over heels. "Your luck is better than mine," Taran laughed ruefully. "You found your mushrooms, and I no more than a pair of bruised shins."
Not so,"
protested Linneo, hastily scraping away the loam, partly covering the stone.
"Look you now, have you ever seen one so shaped? Round as a wheel and smooth as an egg. A windfall it is that needs only the picking up."
If a windfall, Taran thought, it was the hardest and heaviest he had stumbled on, for Linneo now insisted on unearthing the flat rock. They did so with much digging and heaving, and, carrying it between them, struggled back to the farmhold, where Linneo rolled it into the shed, already bursting with an odd array of churn handles, strips of cloth, horse trappings, thongs, hanks of cord, and all the harvest of his weir, nets, and baskets. Over the cook fire, the mushrooms, eked out with the leftover griddle cake and a handful of early vegetables the children had found, simmered so deliciously that Taran and Gurgi needed no urging to stay for the repast. As night fell, Taran welcomed the family's invitation to rest by the hearth. Gurgi, stuffed and contented, began snoring instantly, and Taran, for the first time in many days, slept soundly and dreamlessly. The next morning was bright and crisp. Taran woke to find the sun high, and though he had meant to saddle Melendless and be on his way, he did not do so. If Lineo's Weir had yielded little the day before, the night current had more than made up for it. A great sack of wheat had somehow become tangled with a cluster of dead branches, which served as a raft, and thus had floated downstream, undampened by the river. Gawain, without delay, brought out a large stone querin to grind the grain into meal. All took a hand in the task, the children from eldest to youngest, even Lineo himself. Taran did his share willingly, though he found the querin heavy and cumbersome, as did Gurgi.
"Oh, tiresome millings!"
Gurgi cried.
"Gurgi's poor fingers are filled with achings, and his arms with strainings and painings."
Nevertheless, he finished his turn. Although by the time enough meal had been ground, another day had nearly sped by, and once more Lineo urged the wayfarers to share his hospitality. Taran did not refuse. Indeed, as he stretched by the fire, he admitted to himself that he had secretly hoped Lineo would suggest it. During the next few days, Taran's heart was easier than it had been since he chose to abandon his quest. The children, shy with him at first, as he was with them, had become his fast friends, and frolicked with him as much as they did with Gurgi. With Lineo, each day he visited the nets and the baskets and the weir, sometimes returning empty-handed and sometimes laden with whatever strange assortment the wind or current brought. In the beginning, he had seen no value in the odds and ends, but Lineo found a use for nearly all. A cartwheel was turned into a spinning wheel, parts of the horse bridle made belts for the children. A saddlebag became a pair of boots, and Taran shortly realized there was little the family needed that did not, late or soon, appear from nowhere, and there was nothing, an egg, a mushroom, a handful of feathers delicate as ferns, that was not held to be a treasure. "In a way," Taran told Gurgi, "Lineo's richer than Lord Gast is or ever will be. Not only that, he's the luckiest man in Prydain. I envy no man's riches," Taran added. Then he sighed and shook his head. "But I wish I had Lineo's luck." When he repeated this to Lineo, the man only grinned and winked at him. "Luck, wanderer? One day, if you're lucky, I'll tell you the secret of it." Beyond that, Lineo would say no more. At this time, a thought began taking shape in Taran's mind. Nearly all of Lineo's finds had been put to one use or another, save the flat stone which still lay in the shed. "But I wonder," he told Lineo, "I wonder if it couldn't serve to grind meal better than the querin." "How then?" cried Lineo, greatly pleased. "If you think it can, do as you see fit." Still pondering his idea, Taran roamed the woods until he came upon another stone of much the same size as the first. "That's a stroke of luck," he laughed as Lineo helped him drag it back. Lineo grinned. "So it is, so it is." During the several days following, Taran, with Gurgi's help, toiled unceasingly. In a corner of the shed, he set one stone firmly in the ground and the other above it. In this, he laboriously hollowed out a hole, and, using the leftover harness leathers, in it he affixed a long pole that reached up through an opening in the roof. At the top of the pole, he attached frames of wood over which he stretched large squares of cloth. "But this is no querin," Gurgi cried when at last it was done. "It is a ship for boatings and floatings. But there is no ship, only mast with sails." "We shall see," Taran answered, calling Lineo to judge his handiwork. For a moment, the family stood puzzled at Taran's peculiar structure. Then, as the wind stirred, the roughly fashioned sails caught the corner of the breeze. The mast-like pole shuddered and creaked, and for a breathless instant Taran feared all his work would come tumbling about his ears. But it held fast. The sails bellied out and began turning slowly at first, then faster and faster, while below in the shed the upper stone whirled merrily. Gawain hastened to throw grain into Taran's makeshift mill. In no time outpoured meal finer than any querin had ground. The children clapped their hands and shouted gleefully. Gurgi yelped in astonishment, and Lenio laughed until the tears ran down his cheeks.
Wanderer, he cried, you've made much from little and done it better than ever I could.
Over the next few days, the mill not only ground the family's grain, Taran also struck on a means of using it as a sharpening stone for Lenio's tools. Looking at his handiwork, Taran felt a stirring of pride for the first time since leaving Craddock's Valley, but with it came a vague restiveness. By rights, he told Gurgi, I should be more than happy to dwell here all my life. I've found peace and friendship, and a kind of hope as well. It's eased my heart like balm on a wound. He hesitated. Yet somehow Lenio's way is not mine. A spur drives me to seek more than what small Arvin brings. What I seek I do not know, but alas, I know it is not here. He spoke then with Lenio and regretfully told him he must take up his journeying again. This time, sensing Taran's decision firmly made, Lenio did not urge him to stay, and they bade each other farewell. And yet, Taran said as he swung astride Melendless, alas, you never told me the secret of your luck.
Secret? Replied Lenio. Have you not already guessed? Why, my luck's no greater than yours or any man's. You need only sharpen your eyes to see your luck when it comes, and sharpen your wits to use what falls into your hands.
Taran gave Melendless rein, and with Gurgi at his side, rode slowly from the banks of Small Arvin. As he turned to wave a last farewell, he heard Lenio calling after him, Trust your luck, Taran Wanderer, but don't forget to put out your nets.